Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about books that I would recommend to people just getting back into reading. The Guardian just released their top 100 books of all time, and that really got me thinking of when I got back into reading in 2019. Those are the kinds of things I was looking at. I didn't know about BookTube. I didn't know about any of that. I literally was just Googling 10 books everybody must read, top 100 books of all time. And so that list got me thinking of what would I tell myself today if I had my knowledge from today back in 2019 of some things that I would recommend. And a lot of this isn't, I'm not trying to use hindsight and say read your favorite books. I'm looking at it and saying this kind of spread of books will give you a decent idea of where you want to explore after you've read these kind of starter places, because what you like could lead you down the path of stuff that you really like, or keep you from reading stuff you don't like. So I have 6 categories. I have fantasy, classics, thrillers, horror, sci-fi, and then just general fiction. I kind of used it as a little bit of a catch-all there. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on each one, but let's go ahead and jump in with fantasy. And I know there are people who already know what my first recommendation is going to be. It's the easiest one when it comes to fantasy. It's the one that's probably the most used, and I think it's for good reason, and that is going to be the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said, if you watching this video, you have heard this recommendation, and for good reason. It's a solid series. It opened you up to what, 30 something other books that Sanderson has written. So if you like him, you have this whole thing that you can kind of spend a whole year reading, really. Like I don't know how many people, like I spent a whole year reading the Cosmere basically. And so depending on how much you read, like it is a year-long plus commitment that you can just be enthralled in and enjoy it. And it's a big community. He's an active author. He's very accessible for his fans. All of that kind of stuff I think is great. My next recommendation is on the whole other side of that spectrum, and that is with The Hobbit. And I specifically say The Hobbit because I think The Lord of the Rings is not as accessible, which is going to be funny with some of my recommendations I have later on in this list. But I think if you're going to go back to that like early fantasy stuff, I think The Hobbit is the better choice. One, it's a standalone. So if you don't like it, well, you're not like waiting on a cliffhanger for the rest of the story to be told. But if you do like it, then you do have The Lord of the Rings and all of that stuff. But I just think The Hobbit, it's short, it's a good time, and I think it is a little bit more accessible. I think The Lord of the Rings has some drier spots in it, and I think a lot of people will go into The Lord of the Rings reading it expecting what the movie is, and the books of the movie, while they are a great adaptation, there are some very big differences that happen in it that I don't always think connect the best with modern readers. And then speaking of very modern stuff, I wanted to make sure I got at least one indie series in here, and I went with Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. I've actually only read The Fall, which is the prequel like short story novella of this series, but I think this one just kind of checks the box of modern fantasy. It has dragons. It's going to have so much stuff that people like. All of this is obviously hearsay from what I have heard from people, but it exposes you to the indie scene, and this is, it was a good place for me to put it because I'm just more familiar with it when it comes to fantasy. But I used to think when I got into reading that if you couldn't get published, you just weren't good enough. What a joke that is. And as you get more into reading and more into these spaces, you understand how untrue that is. And I think Ryan Cahill's series here is a great way to expose you to that and really open you up to a lot of really great fantasy, sci-fi. Honestly, there's all kinds of self-pub stuff out there, and I just wanted to highlight that there with Of Blood and Fire, and I think it's like a good entry point for a lot of people. Next up, I have the classics, and classics was so hard because classics vary to person, what you're going to connect with, what you're not going to connect with. And then there's so much that it feels like you need to read here when it comes to classics because they're classics, right? And so I narrowed it down to these 3. A Christmas Carol. One, I think you like Dickens is kind of like must read as far as authors go when it comes to these classics. 2, it's super short. I mean, it's like I don't know, like an hour-long reads or something like that. Like it is super short. Obviously, maybe not, this is coming out in what, June? Maybe not the best time to read A Christmas Carol, but it is the only book I reread. So I wanted to make sure it got on this list here as far as classics went. And I really do just think it kind of opens you up to that kind of storytelling. And, I don't know, it has that kind of cultural appeal that it's, kind of permeated general, like pop culture as well. Like everybody knows about Scrooge and like all of that stuff. So I think it's kind of a good place to be. I also have 1984 for kind of a similar reason as it is kind of permeated culture, but it's permeated culture in a way that so many people who reference it have no idea what they're talking about because they haven't read it. And I think you being able to experiencing a story and see how people can take a story and just completely misunderstand it, or not even try to understand it, but act like they do, and just all kinds of things there. I think 1984 is a really great entry point to do that with. And it opens you up to kind of like a dystopian, authoritarian kind of story, which can send you down, a bunch of different paths. There's so many stuff that you can read alongside, or that are along the same kind of tone and feel of 1984. I think 1984 kind of does it the best of a lot of the big ones that people would consider. So, take that with what you will. But yeah, I think 1984, great recommendation as far as classics go. And then the last one, and this is the one I'm talking about where I said The Lord of the Rings can be not as accessible, but I have Frankenstein here. And maybe this should go in the sci-fi section, whatever. I do think that Frankenstein is one of those classics that it really pushes a genre and lays the foundation in a way for so many other stories that it's super important to read. I actually don't find the language to be as difficult as some people do. Maybe it's because I read it for school like two or three times, and then I read it again when I got back into reading. So like I had been exposed to it a lot, but it's another one. It has permeated culture to such a crazy extent that I think not reading, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a detriment. And it's just like a good feather to have in your cap, because it's going to get brought up a lot and it's going to be referenced a lot by a lot of different things in a lot of different genres. Next up, we have thrillers, and thrillers, they're such a fun genre of book. They're not always the most deep and dense and thought-provoking, but they can be so much fun. And one of the best thrillers I've ever read is The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. This is obviously like, what was this, like 2008-ish, 7-ish, when this was like super, super popular. And this is not the best writing. It's not the tightest story. It's not the thing that is going to like do a lot of those things, but what it is it's going to make you want to keep going. The chapters are like 1 or 2 pages long. You're going to want to just keep plowing through it, constantly going through to figure out what the mystery is. And especially if you haven't seen the movies or anything, I think The Da Vinci Code is a great thriller to get into. I also think, now this is going to be one of my classic ones, is And Then There Were None. I think it is Agatha Christie's best mystery that I have read. I haven't read obviously all of the things she has wrote, but I've kind of her big 3 I have read, and I think And Then We Were None is head and shoulders above the other stories that she's told. This is, once again, another thing that has kind of permeated culture to a certain extent, but it is a great thriller, and one that you were like, I can see why people don't like it, but man, it just works so well in so many ways. And then the last thriller I have is one by Blake Crouch. Blake Crouch, I have on this list, I have Run as the thriller, but he has kind of a lot of these techno thriller kind of things, and I have him on this list particularly in the same kind of reason I have Sanderson. Like, if you like Run, you kind of have a built-in author who has a decent portfolio of stuff that you can go and read after the fact, which is great. And Run also is kind of a different kind of thriller. Like, none of these 3 are the same, right? You have like a very modern thriller mystery. In The Da Vinci Code, you have something that's more of a classic, older, with And Then We Were None. And then Run, it dips into post-apocalyptic just a little bit, which once again, lets you experience a bunch of things in the genre. Next up, I have horror, and we're just going to get it right out of the way. Stephen King is really the answer here. It's pick your poison when it comes to King. I would personally point you towards probably Pet Sematary or Misery. Those would be the 2, especially on the horror front. The Shining is kind of up there, but in a different way. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to say it's definitely got to be Pet Sematary. It's a terrifying book. It's one of the best books I've ever read. I think I read that book in like a day or 2. It's just so good, so enthralling. The character work, just everything about it. It is creepy, unsettling, and just so much stuff. Grief. Just it is one of the best books I've ever read. And so, once again, Stephen King, he's going to give you, he has 75 books you can go read after you've read Pet Sematary, and he obviously has a full gambit of different genres that you can go and read. Then I also have The Troop by Nick Cutter, and this is a book that, like, when I was reading it, it gave me like the heebie-jeebies. It has like body horror elements, so it's a little bit different kind of a horror than Pet Sematary per se, but it exposes you to that, and it's just a very, it's an unsettling story, but that's what you're looking for when it comes to horror, right? And then the last one I have is We Used to Live Here. This was, I don't know, my 2nd or 3rd favorite book of all last year. I absolutely loved it. It's one of the only books where I've been like legitimately like afraid. I always tell the story of like I would be listening to that on audiobook, and I'd be walking up and down in the hallway in my house, and I would like walk by the mirror and like catch myself and like kind of like give myself a jump scare of me in my own mirror in my own house in a fictional book. And like, if a story can do that, I think it's absolutely a huge recommendation. Super easy to read. and it is unlike the other ones that I have mentioned so far. So it kind of fits everything there. Then we move on to sci-fi, which my first recommendation, especially if you're just getting into reading, has got to be Red Rising. I think the biggest faults of Red Rising that I have read so far, which is only the first 2 books, is if you have been exposed to a lot of other stories, you see the cracks in the foundation, some of the plot holes, some of the conveniences, just the mess that is especially the first book in Red Rising. And I have friends who I recommended this to, and they just started reading it, and they're like, that just isn't computing with them because they don't have the same backlog of like acknowledgement for some of this stuff. And it definitely improves a lot as the series has gone on. But with all of that, I think Red Rising offers you a very light entry into sci-fi, because while it's sci-fi, it's very light sci-fi in the hard sci-fi way that I really, really enjoy when it comes to sci-fi. Something that I think more people would point to as harder. It's not even really hard sci-fi, but this is definitely a classic. And I needed to get like an Asimov or a Clarke or somebody onto this. So I ended up going with Childhood's End. I think for how old it is still extremely accessible. It tells a really great story from beginning to end. You have a lot of things that go on there that make sci-fi what sci-fi is, and I think there's some like really great twist and everything that goes in there, and it's just like a bona fide classic of the genre that kind of gives you a whole gamut of stuff. And then my third choice is Red Shirts by John Scalzi, and the reason I picked John Scalzi is there is a couple of different types of sci-fi, and I think each one of these kind of encapsulates a different kind. You have the classic kind of stuff with Clarke. You have the space opera kind of gallivanting soldier space opera with Red Rising. And Red Shirts has the satirical humor that sci-fi can present. There are other examples of this, the We Are Bob, We Are Legion, the Bobbyverse stuff. But I think Scalzi does a lot of this. And I think if you really like Red Shirts and the satirical nature of it, it opens like a whole different part of sci-fi, even though it's not like hard sci-fi that I enjoy, but I don't think as many people do as me. And then my last category is fiction. And this is where I just got some real heavy hitters, some like all-time top books for me. The first one is going to be The Jungle by Upton St. Clair. This is probably a book most people have heard about, but we heard about it in school, and it was about like how it changed the meatpacking industry and brought a lot of like sanitation rules and stuff. This story is so much more than that. It's really the struggle of an immigrant coming to America, being promised one thing and other things happening. And it is, for how old it is, reads very modern, and I think it just it just tells like this harrowing story, and I think it's really easy to have like a lot of compassion for what's going on and everything there. In a similar vein, we have To Kill a Mockingbird, another classic. I feel like this is one that most people have probably read, but if you haven't, you should. I was fortunate in the sense that I didn't read this for school, and so when I got to read it, it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. It tells just like the story of injustice and a small community, and just you just feel like you're there and a part of it. And then the last one, and another similar, these three kind of have a similar feeling to them, which kind of got away from my recommendations, but I just feel like these are 3 books you should read. And the third one is Demon Copperhead. I read that last year. It was my book of the year, and I just absolutely loved it. You follow just the struggles of a young boy growing up in rural poor Appalachia, and it's just a crazy journey. It's not always necessarily going to be a book that is fun and uplifting. It's really not a lot of the time, but you just think it's like one of those books that, if you're getting into reading and like you want some like good modern, because this is newer, I think you should read it. So that is kind of my recommendation, that if I were getting reading today, where I would start with some of these recommendations. And not all of them are going to be winners for everybody, and there's so many options, but I think it's nice to just like kind of put a narrow focus and see where it can grow from there. So let me know what recommendations you would have for some of these categories, anything that you think I like really glaringly missed in all of this, and I'll see that either down in the comments or in the Discord that is linked in the description. That's all for me, and remember, read what you want when you want.